Okay. Let's kind of pull it back now to our little corner of the world. We have some upcoming union negotiations with the employee unions. I kind of threw it out there at last city council meeting that one of your pledges when you were on the campaign trail, and by the way, congratulations for not having to do that this year. Just had to say that. But one of the campaign promises that you made was that you were going to take an active role in the union negotiations.
As mayor.
As mayor.
As mayor under a 266 city, which we are under NRS 266, the mayor is responsible to ensure that all contracts are enforced. I think the mayor has a responsibility to be there, and
Okay.
I will be there.
Okay. Any other council going to be there?
I believe that would be up to council if they want to do that. You'd have to ask them directly. But as mayor, it's my responsibility to be over contracts. I think I would not be doing my job properly if I was not involved in those contract negotiations.
Okay. So we're going to have a little bit different team this year from
We have a completely different team this year.
from some of the things I've heard, and the discussion came at the council meeting the other night. For the first time, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, for the first time, our city attorney is going to take part in
Yes.
the negotiations.
Yes.
That has not happened before.
To the best of my knowledge, no, it has never happened before.
And then we are bringing in an outside
Yes. We're bringing
negotiator,
outside counsel.
outside counsel,
Sure.
who specializes in these things.
Yes.
And then the city manager, I would assume.
Yes, the city manager will be.
So before, the negotiations were always left to solely to the city manager and the internal services director,
Well, the HR director.
HR director.
Right.
Um,
And that's how those.
so it sounds like this year the team is expanding a little bit for the city itself.
It's expanding a lot.
Yeah. Because isn't this a major renegotiation of the contract itself, not just an extension from a prior contract?
We are at the end of the contracts.
Yes.
And all contracts will be negotiated again.
Okay. Rather than just
Now, if they
extend-
wish to extend, you know, I don't know what their positions are at this point.
Okay.
But anything's on the table at this point. Whether it's an extension of what we have, whether it's new contracts, those are everything. Those are the things that will be negotiated. So I really couldn't tell you the answer to that question.
Okay. And while we're on personnel issues, it's been at least 2 years, if I remember right, since the senior managers and executives have had a pay raise. In fact, 2 years ago they took a substantial pay cut.
Mm-hmm.
And last year they did not get a pay raise.
Mm-hmm.
Are you anticipating a change in that this year?
Boy, I could. That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
We will look at all possible ways of still being fiscally responsible. Obviously, our leaders have sacrificed a lot. In fact, all of our employees have been asked to sacrifice, and it is greatly appreciated. We are not out of the fiscal problems yet. Mesquite has been fortunate enough to remain as one of the most fiscally sound cities in the state of Nevada because of the efforts of city staff and the elected officials working together to find ways to do more for less. We do not anticipate a whole lot of extra revenue this year. So those issues will all have to be addressed when we go to budget hearings. I can't say whether or not there will be a raise or not. But they will certainly be addressed at the budget hearings.
Okay. I understand the government moves at a slow But when are you going to tackle the sign ordinance as a whole? You've made some incremental changes when specifically asked by individual businesses, such as the change that's going on right now with the Maverick request for a larger sign, a different kind of sign than what the ordinance right now allows. But you've talked in the past about a major review and some fundamental changes in that sign ordinance, and for some reason that ordinance has always been I don't know.
Well, there's a handful of ordinances that pique the interest of many people.
Right. Oh, that's a good way to put it.
And the sign ordinance is definitely one of those. Our retreat, where we set up some goals
right.
for staff and council, called for a review of the sign ordinance, and I believe that review is third quarter. So they're working on the issues. We should have some more information by around the third quarter this year.
Now, is that third quarter calendar year or third quarter fiscal year?
Good question. I'm going with calendar year myself.
Okay. I never did ask that question.
I'm going with calendar year, so.
Okay. All right. What changes do you want to see the most in that ordinance? What do you think is the number one part of that needs to be changed?
My number one concern, and this goes back many years, obviously working with a business, knowing what signage does and cannot do for your business, and if we're going to focus on signage, signage has to first, number one and foremost, enhance the safety of traveling. We can't have signs that are going to cause problems for drivers, be hard to see. My biggest concern is to go back to the science of how a person recognizes a sign, how long it takes for them to know that that's the place where they need to be as they're driving along at 35, 40 miles an hour. It's all physics. There's basically very little question as to whether or not this is how it actually works. There's been some studies done and there's been some reports made and some very good draft ordinances that allow you to just basically cut and paste these types of rules and regulations into your ordinance to make sure that you're using science and not just guesswork.
Okay.
Now the second part of that obviously is, does the sign look pretty? Well, anybody's guess. You know, you might like purple, I might not like purple. What I'm concerned about, public safety. That's first and foremost. If we're going to say our signage is, whereas public safety, you've read some of the different ordinances, how they start, we have to focus on the things that we can control and are important to everybody. Obviously, some people aren't going to like backlit signs. That's harder to say than shared use path.
Yeah.
Some people don't like that. Other people want monument signs. We can go on and on and on about what's pretty, what isn't pretty, what's aesthetic, what isn't aesthetic. And generally that's where the length in the conversation comes when it comes to the sign ordinance. How we want to look as a city is important. But first and foremost, I want to ensure that these signs that we're putting up can be read, can be understood safely, so that our people on the road can negotiate our roads. The medians don't make that any easier. Everybody pretty much knows that I wasn't a fan of the medians, so, and I'll put that out there, with signage and the medians, we add another angle to the safety concerns that we have on our roads. And I want to make sure that with our signage, it's easy enough to read, it's easy enough to understand as people are driving, and so that it can get these people directed into the businesses and the different locations here in the city.
Okay.
That's my concern with the sign ordinance.
Okay.
And I intend to introduce some of that draft legislation when we come to that in the third quarter. I'll be sharing that and making sure that Mr. Seacrest has my information and sees that, so that it can be presented and we can share it with all the council and they can decide how they want to go with that.
Okay.